Welcome back to Trailblaze. This is Jamal Simmons.
Hey, I'm Matt Butler.
Matt couldn't remember his name, but we're glad that he's here. But we have our friend with us, Adrienne Elrod. Adrienne, you may have seen her on all the television channels all over the place, MSNBC mostly these days. And Adrienne is a longtime Democratic strategist. She's been on all the campaigns, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. And now she is here with us on Trailblaze. Adrienne, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. It's so great to join you guys. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, and to be a guest is just extra exciting. So thank you.
Well, you know all the things, Adrienne. So we had to talk to you.
Not really.
You show up in so many places. We wanted to talk to you, and this podcast is about 2028 campaign because it's never too early to talk about the next presidential campaign. So we're going to kind of relate it to that. But we wanted to get your sense of where things stand right now in 2026 going into the midterms and how much you think that'll matter for the presidential campaign.
Well, I think it's going to matter a lot. First of all, I want to take a step back. And Jamal, you've been involved in a lot of these campaigns too. I mean, sometimes I think Democrats, if we have a really good midterm cycle, we think, oh, we're back. Everything's fine. The brand is in shape. Like, we're going to freaking barnstorm our way and win in 2028. That is not, that is a false pretense. That is not normally the case. I mean, oftentimes we will have, it is historical, of course, as you guys both know, that the party that's not in power, and this time, of course, is the Democrats, we tend to have, regardless of, how popular or unpopular the president is, of the Republican Party, if it's the opposite party, the party that's not in control tends to have a good midterm cycle. And I think Trump is going to make it extra good for us because Trump he's underwater on almost everything, on the economy, on even on immigration, maybe not border security, but almost everything that matters, affordability, economy, healthcare, he's underwater. So we have every reason to believe that we're going to have a good midterm cycle. But Democrats should not rest on our laurels and assume that means all of a sudden we're going to have a great 2028 cycle. So I think we're going to take back the House. I think there's a decent shot we're going to take back the Senate. And then I think we are going to be off to the races. There's not going to be this, we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then 2028 starts in, February of 2027. I think we're going to see probably 10 to 15 candidates declare by the end of the year. And I think several of those folks will at least announce that they've started an exploratory committee the day after the midterm. So it's going to be exciting, but Democrats still have a lot of work to do. Our brand is underwater. And we need to really do a lot to repair. And I think because of the breadth of talent that we have going into 2028, some of the really strong governors, for example, who are going to run, which I know we're going to talk about some of those folks in a second, that is going to help lift our brand. We just have to make sure that we walk and chew gum at the same time. And if Hakeem Jeffries goes from being Leader Jeffries to Speaker Jeffries, we can't just run the clock against Trump. We've got to make sure that we have a forward-looking agenda that really helps move some of the voters we've lost as a result of the last few cycles, that we move them back into our camp.
Yeah, that's right. And Adrienne, just to refresh my memory, you were at the DCCC for a while, right? The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee.
Good mem. Yeah. About 20 years ago. In fact, it was 20 years ago, which makes me want to throw up. 2005, 2006 cycle when Rahm Emanuel was the chair and we took back the House. So it was really exciting to be there that cycle.
Yeah, that was a big deal. And we all learn a lot in those formative experiences especially when it's a part of a winning campaign. You kind of learn a lot of the things that are going to be helpful for later. Matt, you're a party guy. I mean, how are you feeling about right now, 2026?
Yeah, I feel okay. I wonder if this war gets settled within the next couple of weeks, that Trump will then start to have some of his base come back, because I think he's really done a lot of damage to his coalition. Between Epstein and the war, which, we campaigned on both of those things, releasing the files and not going into war. I think he's done a ton of damage to his coalition. So that's going to come back to him a little bit. And so I think that'll probably blunt some of the Democrats' momentum. But hopefully it won't be too much, and we can still get the entire House. And, the Senate would be amazing. If we can have both of those chambers, we're going to be in great shape going into 28.
I mean, I don't know about you guys. I mean, Adrienne, you told me too. It feels to me like something's building.
Yep.
It's not getting better for them. They're not doing anything to make this work out. It's like it's getting worse.
It's getting so much worse. And look, I do agree with Matt. I mean, the one thing that I've been surprised by is how much the MAGA base is stuck with Trump thus far on the war. He actually is, I think, maybe even gained a little bit more in the approval ratings among his base. But if this war does not end in the next few weeks, if it becomes a protracted, prolonged war, and worst case scenario, of course, that we put boots on the ground over there, I think you're going to really see his base fracture even more. But on other things, his base has alienated him. Epstein, economy, affordability, healthcare, which is not something that is always top of mind for the MAGA base. But when it falls under the umbrella of affordability, which is really what the 2026 midterms are about, it does impact his base. And look, guys, I mean, Trump had a decisive win for sure in 2024, a much bigger win than he had in 2016. But it was still not a giant margin. I think when it came down to a couple of states that really mattered, it was around 250,000 votes. Obviously, he did better in the popular vote, but a lot of people voted for him. And I know you guys have talked to a lot of these folks, some of the Trump voters, or even Trump voters who are just disgusted with the fact that gas prices are still high, food is expensive, people are trying so hard to make ends meet. They're terrified of AI. They're worried about the economy writ large and how AI is going to take over their jobs. And Trump is, focusing on, taking over Venezuela and taking over Iran and trying to turn Gaza into, the next Ritz-Carlton of the Middle East. I mean, he is not taking care of what matter to his voters. And while he does have some loyalty, his name's not going to be on the ballot in 2026, which I think gives Democrats even more of an edge.
I will say this. I was the gas station down the street from my house. I get gas there whenever. And a month ago, before this war started, gas was $2.99 a gallon. It is now $3.95 a gallon, right? It's almost a full $1 higher. And gas prices are to regular people what the stock market is to billionaires, right? Everybody can tell you what the gas price was around the corner from their house or wherever it is they go to get gas. People know exactly to the penny what the gas price is. So
that's a really good point. And I think in West Virginia, where my guess is the rural West Virginia, I should say, which is one of the poorest parts of the country, gas is like $4.50.
Wow.
Even more than where you are. So yeah, it's the economy stupid. It's the James Carville line. I mean, it still holds true to this day. And I think Trump is going to be in for a rude awakening. Even if the war is over, I think he is still going to have a really hard time in the 2026 midterms.
All right. So,
and in places like West Virginia, people are driving a lot farther than city dwellers like us are driving. So it is. I mean, you are getting that gas price hit every couple times a week for a lot of people. So this is we're not feeling it the way that a lot of people are.
So we wanted to talk a little bit with Adrienne about what is happening with some of these potential candidates and maybe the staff primary, the consultant primary, what's coming up, who people got their Choosin shoes on, and some people are joining up now, or we're going to wait to see if they join up in January. So we're going to how you want to do this, Matt? You want to just throw some names out? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do want to talk about, as we've talked about the umbrella of the invisible primary for all of this thing. And there's a bunch of primaries underneath there, right? There's a fundraising money primary that people are starting to line up their donors, figuring out who their bundlers are going to be, how they're going to get the money to fund their campaign in 28. But then there's also a talent primary. There are only so many campaign managers to go around. There are only so many media consultants, so many pollsters. And so you really want to be able to get in early and figure out who your team is going to be to run your campaign in 2028. So I think, let's throw out a couple names and we can kind of bandy them around a little bit.
Yeah, well, one of the people who is talking about running for president in kind of a really robust way, I think there are a few people who are being clear about it. Gavin Newsom obviously wants to run for president. Andy Beshear is talking about it without really hedging that much. Why don't we start with Beshear? I think, do you know anybody who is kind of figuring out their Beshear politics right now?
Yeah. In fact, I just hosted a little meet and greet for Beshear in Washington, D.C. with the very operatives that you're talking about, the people that, 15 to 20 people who run or 30 people, however many it is going into 2027, are going to be recruiting some of these folks to be a part of their team. And I'm not aligned with Bashir, just to make it clear, but I have offered many people who are looking to run in 2028, especially some of the governors who, who have never run for president before and may, not know some of the operative class the way that we all do. I've offered to host events for them. So Bashir is working with a guy named Eric Hires. Eric has spent a ton of time running races kind of throughout the Midwest. He's got a really good reputation. And of course, Bashir has this incredible opportunity right now. I always look at who has a platform that is sort of built in at this moment that can parlay them into 2027, 2028. Bashir is running the NGA, National Governors Association. So he gets to travel around the country and talk about, raising money for governors who are, he has a built-in platform essentially, which gives him a huge advantage because he doesn't have to use his PAC money all the time to travel. He's got a built-in network. You look at somebody like Governor Pritzker, who is a sitting governor, and then you look at people like, Rahm Emanuel, my old boss from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He doesn't hold an elected office right now. He's not running a major committee, but he's figuring out very smartly how to go into states, how to campaign for, some of the key races that are on the 2026 ballot, not just congressional and Senate. I think he just came back from Wisconsin and campaigned for the Supreme Court, one of the Supreme Court candidates there. He's figuring out how to make his own platform. But going back to Bashir, Eric Hires, somebody who's been with him for a long time. And I, certainly don't know if Eric will be the campaign manager, but my guess is if he's not, he will be in the senior leadership of his team.
So I spent some time with Eric a couple of weeks ago at an event, and one of the things that he was pretty clear about and I think is interesting is he's got a pretty good track record in these big statewide races, whether it's, Montana or, obviously Kentucky. He has been around. And so I think Rhode Island, he worked for Gina, the former governor, Gina Raimondo, the former governor of Rhode Island.
Someone else who may run. And he did Biden's campaign in 2020, the first campaign. He's one of these guys that whether Bashir gets in or doesn't, if he doesn't get in or he doesn't make it all the way, you can bet Hires is going to be one of these folks who ends up on somebody else's campaign. 1,000%. I mean, you guys know this very well. I feel even weird just telling you guys, but in the sake of conversation, I mean, a lot of the people who are going to be recruited to run campaigns in 2027, 2028 will be coming off very successful campaigns in 2026.
Right.
Or they're going to be running party committees. Or they will have worked in a state that either flipped or did exceptionally well in a previous presidential, but recent. You want someone who understands, especially that, even if you're running the campaign and you're not the communications director, you still want somebody who understands, the digital aspects and how campaigns have become more and more revolutionized and how, yes, it's still important to go knock on doors, but the digital aspects, running a very strong digital campaign is increasingly more important in a presidential. You want someone with the most recent experience possible. And then you also want those folks who are loyal to you. Eric has been loyal to Bashir for a long time. Sean Sweeney is someone I think we all know who has been working with Rahm for a long time. I don't know, again, if Rahm is definitely going to run, and I don't know if Sean will be a part of that campaign, but he is part of Rahm's team. And so I think you're going to see a mix of people who have very recent experience combined with some old school veterans who are going to be in demand. And I think, it's sort of like what 2019 looked like, right? Where there were more campaign staffers. They were almost interviewing the candidates as opposed to the candidates interviewing them. We're going to see that happen again this time.
Totally right.
So let's talk a little bit about Sweeney for a second before we hop off of that. We know Sean Sweeney worked for Rahm, as you said, for a long time. He was at the DCCC. He was at the House Democratic Caucus. I think he was at Priorities USA.
He was at the White House with him.
He was Rahm's chief of staff when he was chief of staff at the White House.
Chief of staff for the chief of staff. Yep.
Yes, the coast to the coast.
That's good.
From coast to coast. He's been with him, at the Commerce Department in the last administration. So he is a guy who has been around and he knows his principal well. As you were just saying, it's very important. A lot of people are newbies around a principal, but for people who know their principal well, all these guys are a little peculiar. So they got to be able to manage that, right?
No, incredible. And that is exactly right, which is why I think you kind of want that, you want someone, whether they're managing the campaign or whether they're a senior advisor, who just came off of a major race or who's been a senior part of a major race in the last 2 to 4 years. And then you also want somebody who is, the longtime loyal person, which is oftentimes why you see, kind of like the campaign manager and then the like very top senior advisor. And there's usually some sort of amalgamation there. And look, I mean, I was at headquarters on the 2024 campaign for first President Biden, then Vice President Harris. And we had some strong talent at HQ as well. But I think a lot of candidates in 27, 28 will be looking for people who ran major states, who are not just sitting at headquarters, dictating where money's going and looking at the poll numbers and crunching and figuring out how are we going to shift around advertising dollars. If you're going to try to really win or at the very least be one of the top 5 candidates in this what I expect to be a very crowded primary in 2028, you want to make sure that you have someone who really knows how to win a state, because that is going to be critically important to your success in the campaign.
Well, and as you know, you were in the Biden-Harris world. The one thing Joe Biden had going for him in the 2020 campaign is he did have a lot of those people, those folks who had been around him for a long time.
He did.
They knew who he was. They knew his strengths, his weaknesses, how to play him on the field, right? There were coaches who knew how to play their candidate and to bring out the best.
Yep.
In 2024, obviously President Biden was, he was an older candidate. He was having different kinds of struggles. But one of the challenges of my old boss, Kamala Harris, is she doesn't really have a group of advisors who've been with her for a long time. And it's always been part of the sort of chattering of Washington, D.C. that was going to matter. But I think when it comes time for something like a big race like this, I'll be very interested to see if she decides to get in, how many people who were with her in the 2024 race come back, because that will tell us whether or not they really are people who are ready to sort of, coach her through the process and have the credibility and she trusts them. That will tell us a lot about her prospects if she runs again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great point. Look, just because you work for somebody in 2024, I mean, she was the sitting vice president at that time, does not necessarily mean that you're going to have the same exact grouping of people who go work for that person in 2028. And conversely, she may want to pick, if she decides to run, a whole different team. She's certainly going to have some folks out there who want to be a part of her team. If she wants to do it, she may decide to go a completely different direction. But look, I mean, Brian Fallon, somebody we all know very well, is a dear friend of mine, is working with her right now. I don't know if that means he's going to go with her if she decides to run, but you do start to see some of the people who are in the mix now. I mean, guys, again, this is all going to start real fast.
Yeah.
And if you're someone like the Madam Vice President, she can start talking to people now. If you're somebody like Governor Shapiro, who's got a reelection, for example, I think you have to be a little and Governor Westmore, I think you have to be a little careful because if it starts leaking out that you are having conversations with people about being a part of your 2028 team for president very actively when you've got an election to win first. And again, Westmore is going to win with flying colors. So is Josh Shapiro. But you still want to make sure that you're taking care of business at home before you start actively recruiting. So again, it's like, if Rahm and Madam Vice President and, people who are not currently in elected office, Gina Raimondo, come out of the gate, a couple days after the midterms, they may have a staff advantage because people who are focusing on their reelection right now, it's hard for them to really start actively trying to run for president, when they've got their own reelection to worry about.
So, Matt, do you think that's a good question? Do you think this is a plus or a minus if you are running for reelection in 2026? Is it make you a better candidate for 2028, or is it going to be something that holds you back going into the presidential primaries?
Well, it holds you back to some extent, right? Because it stops some of the stuff that you can talk about. Like, Josh Shapiro should probably not be spending a bunch of time in New Hampshire and meeting donors, et cetera. And unless he's simply just raising money for his campaign. I mean, you do get to fly under the radar in terms of you can talk to a bunch of pollsters, you can talk to a bunch of media consultants because you need them for your current race. And John Kerry had that advantage, right? We ran for Senate in 2002. So I I came on as the CFO to run a Senate campaign that we were going to win by, I don't know, 60 points or something like that. So, we raised a bunch of money for that race. We hired a bunch of talent for that race. And you get to try the talent on and see how it works together. Because, Adrienne's exactly right. I do think you want new blood coming in and you want your old advisors. But a lot of times the hotshot new guy and the old advisors don't necessarily get along so well. So it's going to make our lives in this show pretty interesting because there's going to be a lot of drama in some of these campaigns.
Well, what they often say is you don't always want to be the first team on the campaign. You want to be the relief team.
Well, that's
yes, right.
Yeah, that's
you want to be
you
want to be the one who's like, consulting and doing TV hits and kind of hanging out, and then there's been an overhaul. We see how the field is shaking out. We're creeping into Super Tuesday, and here's the 5 people who are doing the best. I'm going to jump on that team as they are also maybe overhauling or expanding their operation too.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. Once this gets going and candidates start dropping out, those operatives then start going to the other campaigns. So it's the campaigns get to start sort of upgrading certain positions, and that also creates some interesting staff dynamics as well. So.
Well, we talked about staff, but, one big category, particularly in modern campaigning, are the consultants. And what's interesting is that there are a lot of these consultants that have conflicting relationships, right? You think about Jeff Pollack at Global Strategy Group. I mean, Jeff Pollack has worked for Pritzker. He's doing work for Shapiro. He's got a few of these sort of conflicting relationships. Our friend Doug Thornell. Doug Thornell is working for Wes Moore. He also worked for Mark Kelly. I think SKDK, his firm, I think they did some work for Ruben Gallego. So, there are a few of these firms that will see a consultant primary take place also.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, look, everyone you just mentioned, I think Jeff Pollack may be the very best pollster in the entire business. I've worked with him on a number of races. He's incredible. But yeah, he's going to have some decisions to make more than likely. And if you are an in-demand pollster, an in-demand media consultant, obviously Thornell is incredible. You want to sort of expand your odds, because what if all of a sudden someone decides I'm not going to run? What if all of a sudden Governor Moore says, you know what, this is not my time. I'm going to wait another 4 years. And if you put all your eggs in that basket, if you put your entire consultancy existence for several years into that one person, and then they don't run, you will get picked up by somebody else, but that loyalty and that relationship that you built with that person will unfortunately not be something that you can lean on. So I think it's smart for these guys to expand. But no, it's always interesting. It's always very interesting to see who signs on with who. And it's certainly, especially in a crowded primary like this, where there's not that one heir apparent. We haven't been in this situation in a while. Everyone thought Hillary Clinton was definitely going to win in 2008 going into the start of the cycle. Obviously, things changed. I worked for her campaign. Same with 2016. Everyone thought Hillary's definitely going to be the nominee. She was, but Bernie certainly gave her a run for his money, and he picked up some pretty strong consultants who had worked for quote-unquote mainstream candidates through the years who joined him because they saw him as an insurgent and thought, wait a minute, I might not be able to really be able to penetrate into the Clinton staff consultancy circle, but I have more of a way to get in with Bernie and make my mark. Long story short, we don't have that one person, I don't think, this cycle who is the obvious choice. And by the way, if you do start off with people thinking you're the obvious choice, you're going to be the nominee, that is not a good position to be in. I know some people think that Gavin Newsom, and maybe to an extent, Madam Vice President, are holding those cards right now, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think they both just have strong name ID, and I think that will change pretty quickly once the primary process starts. But it's always interesting to watch the early cycle jockeying. And one more thing I'll add: President Biden amassed a really strong campaign team in the primary in 2020, but he got in so late that I think probably some of the talent that he would have additionally tried to scoop up were already on other campaigns because a lot of people just didn't think he was going to run. So when you look at the roster of people he had, who, again, were incredible, including my dear friend Kate Bedingfield, who was his longtime communications director, and he was truly one of the best talents in the business, he did have a lot of people who had been working for him as vice president, who had worked for him in the Senate, who had worked on some of his previous, Delaware Senate campaigns, which, last I checked, that's a pretty blue state. He didn't always have the folks at writ large who had, figured out how to battle it out in really close states. But he still ended up winning the primary for a lot of reasons that, were not necessarily because the campaign had run a very specific strategy. It was because, it looked like Bernie was going to take it away, and there was a lot of consolidation around him as a moderate.
Yeah, one candidate competition that we will see is sort of between Gavin Newsom and Vice President Harris if they decide to go head to head. Because remember, Ace Smith was Kamala Harris's consultant when she ran for president in 2019. He is now a consultant to Gavin Newsom, he and Sean Clegg. So we will see whether or not, the Ace Smith primary takes place, but I'm betting probably Gavin is.
I've been thinking a lot about that one.
It's a big deal,
Who do
right?
Ace and Sean pick?
Yeah, it's a really big deal. So I think we got a lot of this to sort through, but I'm glad you came and helped us pick through it for today.
Thank you so much. It's been great.